Welcome to Walking the Haftarah. I'm Tyler Merwin, and this is Torah Portion Ki Tissa. This week's portion is Exodus 30, verse 11 through 34, verse 35. The Haftarah this week is 1 Kings 18:1 through 39. Ki Tissa means when you elevate. In our opening line, where it says, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, when you take the census of the people of Israel, then each shall give a ransom for his life to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh when you number them, that there be no plague among them when you number them. Exodus 30, verses 11 and 12. The literal Hebrew for that opening is, when you elevate the heads of the children of Israel, which is an idiom for taking or counting a census. This week our portion and our Haftarah are actually very familiar. We'll see two stories that show the people of Israel falling into idolatry and righteous leadership that brings them back to their senses. This week's Torah portion will deal with the infamous golden calf incident, and our Haftarah will cover Elijah and the prophets of Baal. So let's begin with a review of the Torah portion. We begin with the census and how it was to be taken. Each person over the age of 20 was to give a half shekel. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than the half shekel, when you give Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's offering to make atonement for your lives. Exodus 30, verse 15. Adonai is teaching us that regardless of personal wealth or station in life, each soul is just as valuable in his sight. And by giving a half shekel instead of a whole, it shows that we are not islands unto ourselves, but are part of a greater whole to be used for his kingdom work. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, you shall also make a basin of bronze, with its stand of bronze, for washing. You shall put it between the tent of meeting and the altar, and you shall put water in it, with which Aaron and his sons shall wash their hands and their feet. Exodus 30, verses 17 through 19. Next, we get the last item that was to be built for the tabernacle, the bronze or copper laver, depending on your translation. I see also this as a type of spiritual door, as I described the golden incense altar to be in last week's Torah portion. The priests had to wash their hands and feet in the water from the laver before entering the holy place, as they would be walking on holy ground and handling holy things. This is a spiritual door from the common world into the holy space of the sanctuary, where I describe the golden altar as being the doorway into Adonai's actual presence. We can't enter his presence without being set apart from the common, everyday world. Next, we are told about the formulation of the holy anointing oil that was to be made. All the items of the Mishkan were to be anointed with this oil, along with Aaron and his sons. Then there was a strong warning. It shall not be poured on the body of an ordinary person, and you shall not make no other like it in composition. It is holy, and it shall be holy to you. Whoever compounds any like it, or whoever puts any of it on an outsider, shall be cut off from his people. Exodus 30, 32, and 33. To be cut off was to be spiritually removed from Israel by the Holy One himself. Next, we're given the formulation for the holy incense. It also has the same penalty for misappropriation, to be cut off from Israel, if it's misused. Then Adonai appoints Bezalel and Aholiab as the master craftsmen who were to lead the work of constructing the items of the tabernacle. Next, there's a review of the Sabbath, to observe it and to keep it holy, because it keeps us holy. Holy Set taught us about a term called smichut, which would translate as placement. And the idea is more the placement of certain text. Why does something appear in a certain area versus something else? So the placement of the Shabbat regulations seems a little odd here. As we're going over the plans for the Mishkan and its everyday service, it seems like it's kind of shoehorned in. But the placement, or smichut, seems to be here to remind us that even the holy work of building the Mishkan was to cease or rest during the Shabbat. The Shabbat supersedes all earthly activities. even something as holy as building a house for the presence of the Holy One. Chapter 31 ends with, "And he gave to Moses, when he had finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God." Exodus 31:18. Next, we get into the golden calf, the connection to our Haftarah this week. When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, "Up, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." Exodus 32, verse 1. The issue that the people are having is missing Moses, not God himself. Being on top of the mountain that's burning with fire for 40 days is a very supernatural event, something no ordinary person could expect to do and live even for a single day. The sages say that they expected him back sooner than when he came, a simple miscalculation. They felt like they had to approach Adonai through a mediator. And they, in fact, chose this course when they told Moses to speak to God because they couldn't stand to listen to him, and that they would do whatever Moses relayed. Aaron tells them to bring gold jewelry from their own families, expecting having to give up some personal wealth might actually delay their actions, but they didn't. It's also thought that Hur tried to stop the crowd from taking this action, but he was killed during his stand. Aaron is generally understood to be using delay tactics as he knows Moses will return soon, even though the people expected that he should have already returned. Aaron then is involved in creating the golden calf to some degree. The whole event is incomprehensible, especially the part Aaron played. We know Adonai was angry with Aaron, but if he willingly led the people into idolatry, would God let him to continue to be his high priest? In fact, when Moses and Aaron are denied access into the Promised Land, the only infraction stated is not hallowing God before the people by striking the rock instead of speaking to it in the wilderness of Zin. You would have thought that the golden calf incident would be a much greater offense than striking the rock. It's very confusing, but I think it shows us that there's more information that we're just not privy to. And they said, "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Exodus 32:4. The "they" here is thought to be the mixed multitude that came up out of Egypt with Israel. Remember that everyone who was in Egypt was very used to a pantheon of gods, and it was understood that the lesser gods would serve the greater one. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh." And they rose up early the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Exodus 32:5 and 6. The sin here is not replacing Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh with idols, but worshiping Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh through and with idols and idolatrous actions. Now Moses is still up on the mountain with the Holy One, who tells Moses what happens, and then he states, "And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, in order that I may make a great nation of you." Exodus 32:9 and 10. But Moses pleads with Adonai for mercy for the people, explaining that it would tarnish the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh for him to destroy his people. Moses heads down the mountain, grabs Joshua, and then heads to the camp. Upon seeing the revelry, he throws down and breaks the tablets in front of them. He burns the calf and grinds it into powder and has the people drink it, like the trial of the Sotah, the trial of the wife accused. There was a division and chaos in the camp, so Moses stood at the gate, calling, "Who is on Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's side? Come to me." The tribe of Levi answers Moses' call, and they are sent out to kill the idolaters. which ended up being about 3,000 people. We also find in the book of Acts, at the same time of Shavuot, that about 3,000 people were added to the kingdom after the outpouring of his Spirit. So Moses returned to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh and said, Alas, this people has sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. But now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written. Exodus 32, 31, and 32. Adonai tells Moses that he will blot out those who are guilty. This would be outside of the 3,000 slain by the Levites. Then Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh sent a plague on the people because they made the calf, the one that Aaron made. Exodus 32, 35. Next, Adonai tells Moses to lead the people from Mount Sinai to the Promised Land, but he says that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh will not go with them. Moses pitches his tent far outside the camp, and Adonai would meet with him there, which is why it was called the tent of meeting. Thus Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh used to speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. When Moses turned again into the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. Exodus 33:11. This is how close Moses' relationship with the Holy One was. Moses pleads again with Adonai, and he agrees indeed to go with Israel, and it says to give Moses rest. Then Moses boldly asks to see Adonai's glory. He tells Moses that no one can see his face and live. He says that he will place Moses in the cleft of the rock and will pass before him, and Moses will see his back. Then he is told to carve out 2 stone tablets like the first, and Adonai will inscribe the words on the tablets like the first set. Moses ascends the mountain with the stone tablets to meet the Holy One, and the Holy One reveals the 13 attributes of his mercy to Moses. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh descended in the cloud and stood with him there, and proclaimed the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh passed before him and proclaimed, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and the children's children, to the 3rd and the 4th generation. Exodus 34, 5-7. Adonai renews his covenant with Israel, and Moses stayed on the mountain another 40 days and 40 nights. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand as he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone, because he had been talking with Elohim. Exodus 34, verse 29. So atonement has been made, and Moses has such a close relationship with the Holy One that he physically glows. Moses would wear a veil over his face so as not to freak out the people, and that's where this week's portion ends. This brings us to our Haftarah this week, Melachim 1, or 1 Kings, chapter 18, verses 1-39. To set the stage, in chapter 17, Adonai sends Elijah to the wicked King Ahab, declaring that there will be no rain on the land except by Elijah's word, which is actually God's word. Israel had fallen into idolatry, primarily through Baal worship through Ahab's wife, Jezebel. This was the reason Elijah was sent to declare the judgment of the drought on the land. The drought set in and was having devastating effects, and that's where we pick up. After many days, the word of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. 1 Kings 18:1. So they've suffered 3 years of severe drought up until this point. So Elijah went to show himself to Ahab. Now the famine was very severe in Samaria. And Ahab called Obadiah, who was over the household. Now Obadiah feared Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh greatly, and when Jezebel cut off the prophets of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50s in a cave and fed them with bread and water. Verses 2-4. Obadiah was a great prophet, though his employer, King Ahab, didn't know about this, and his righteous actions of sheltering the prophets could have cost him his life. Jezebel had executed all of Adonai's prophets that she knew of, as they spoke against her and Ahab's idol worship. And Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go through the land to all the springs of water and to all the valleys. Perhaps we may find grass, and save the horses and the mules alive, and not lose some of the animals." So they divided the land between them and passed through it. Ahab went in one direction by himself, and Obadiah went in the other direction by himself. Verses 5 and 6. Ahab and his servant Obadiah were out searching for water and any pasture land that could keep the animals alive. And as Obadiah went on the way, behold, Elijah met him. And Obadiah recognized him and fell on his face and said, "Is it you, my lord Elijah?" And he answered him, "It is I. Go tell your lord, behold, Elijah is here." And he said, "How have I sinned, that you would give me your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As Yod-Heh-Vaveh your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my Lord has not sent to seek you. And when they would say, he is not here, he would take an oath of the kingdom or nation that they had not found you. And now you say, go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And as soon as I have gone from you, the spirit of Yod-Heh-Vaveh will carry you I know not where. And so, when I come to tell Ahab that he cannot find you, he will kill me, although your servant have feared Yod-Heh-Vaveh from my youth. Has it not been told my Lord what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of Yod-Heh-Vaveh, how I hid 100 of men of Yod-Heh-Vaveh's prophets by 50s in a cave and fed them with bread and water? And now you say, go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here, and he will kill me. Verses 7 through 14. Ahab felt Elijah was personally responsible for the drought, and not his own sin and idolatry. So he had been looking for Elijah for a long time. I find it interesting that miraculous acts, like being teleported from place to place by the Spirit of the Lord, was so within their experience that Obadiah would actually fear that would be the case and that's what was going to happen. And Elijah said, as Yod-Heh-Vaveh of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself to him today. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" And he answered, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of Yod-Heh-Vaveh and followed the Baals. Now therefore, send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table." Verses 15 through 19. To eat at Jezebel's table is an idiom to be sustained by provisions provided by her, though some would have been her regular guests, no doubt. It's unknown whether Ahab discerned the purpose of this gathering. He may have believed that it was just a gathering to call for rain. So Ahab sent all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, "How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If Yod-Heh-Vaveh is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him." And the people did not answer him a word. Verses 20 and 21. Israel felt that they could have both Yod-Heh-Vaveh and Baal. Why would they have to compromise or choose? This was like the golden calf. They thought it was okay to mix the worship of idols with the worship of the Holy One. Now this, in fact, was normal in all the cultures around them. So you can see why it would come into their minds. Worshipping Baal and Asherah fed their carnal flesh. As long as they continued to worship Yod-Heh-Vaveh also, they felt like this was all acceptable. This also speaks to us today. Though we are called to be in this world, we are called to be not of this world. Yet many believers are fully of the world and in the world, though they still have a semblance of godliness. So Elijah is calling them to make a choice, one or the other. He's telling them they can't have both. Then Elijah said to the people, even I only, am left a prophet of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let 2 bulls be given to us, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, and cut it in pieces, and lay it on the wood. But put no fire on it, and I will prepare the other bull, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire on it. And you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people answered, It is well spoken. Verses 22 to 24. Elijah, making sure that he has no clear physical advantage in this contest, lets the prophets of Baal choose which bull they will offer. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, Choose for yourselves 1 bull and prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire on it. And they took the bull that was given to them, and they prepared it, and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. And at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation. But there was no voice, no one answered, no one paid attention. Verses 25 through 29. So the prophets of Baal go first in this competition of the gods. Elijah openly mocks them as they continue in their vain attempts to clearly show their the foolishness of idol worship to the people who are watching this as a sideshow. The works of the evil one can seem enticing and powerful when people are swept away in their sins, following the desires of their flesh. But when we step back from sin with a sober mind and see with clear spiritual vision, we can clearly see what seemed to be so real and powerful was nothing but sleight of hand and a cheap parlor trick. Then Elijah said to all the people, Come near to me. And all the people came near to him. And he repaired the altar of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh that had been thrown down. Verse 30. Elijah wanted the people to come near to see what he was doing, and to show there was no sleight of hand or anything that would cause an illusion. It was all real. Saul had once built an altar on Mount Carmel, and this is thought to be the altar that he rebuilt. Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh came, saying, Israel shall be your name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed. And he put the wood in order, and cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood. And he said, Fill 4 jars with water, and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. And he said, Do it a second time. And they did it a second time. And he said, Do it a third time. And they did it a third time. And the water ran around the altar and filled the trench also with water. Verses 31 through 35. Reading this verse, we can clearly see that the drenching of the wood and the sacrifice with water would make the task of actually lighting it on fire very, very difficult. But what might not be as obvious reading it from a distance is how precious water was in the midst of this devastating drought. And here Elijah is pouring great amounts of it out on the ground. And at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Verse 36. The offering of the oblation is the afternoon offering, or the mincha offering, which would be around 3 p.m. or the 9th hour of the day. This would be the time that the evening lamb was sacrificed daily in the temple, the second part of the Tamid offering, the morning lamb and the evening lamb. So Elijah is doing this at the time appointed for sacrifice. Answer me, O Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. Then the fire of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. Verse 37 and 38. Here we see the heart of the matter, the plea that the people of God would turn back their hearts to the Holy One of Israel and stop mixing the holy worship of Him with the profane worship of Baal and Asherah. Adonai boldly and miraculously answers Elijah's prayer with fire from heaven for all to clearly see which God is real and which God is worthy of worship. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, He is God. Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, He is God. Verse 39. Once again, the people of Israel are shaken from their idolatrous slumber when they see the power of the one true God. And after the golden calf, the people repented of their sin, acknowledging the sovereignty of the Holy One. Let us purpose ourselves to be like Moses and Elijah in our generation. Let us lift up Yeshua, the one true Savior of the world, so that all men will be drawn unto Him. I pray this teaching has been edifying. Let's lift up the name of the Holy One. With love, in Echad, Shalom.